Hello, my name is Zavanya Shukla, and this is my co-host Karen Marooney, and you're listening to Gradient Dissent Business. Welcome to the show. Welcome, everyone. Our guest today is Chris Van Pelt. Chris is the co-founder of Weights and Biases, which a lot of you might know already. Before Weights and Biases, Chris founded Figure 8, and Chris has been doing machine learning for over 15 years. So he was doing ML before ML was cool, before it was called deep learning. I've personally worked with Chris for more than 4 years, and I've learned a lot from him, and I'm super excited to talk to him. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be here.
Thank you.
So, Chris, in this show, we're taking a little bit of a different approach from Lucas, and we're trying to understand, like Karen said, the people behind and the stories behind the products. So we all have a lot of friends who are in that state where they are showing their product to their first few users, and it's easy to get lost and like chase down wrong rabbit holes or like not know what the right first user is. So like, how do you identify them and like make sure you don't like customize the product too much for them? And then how do you keep going with the current idea when you're hearing no? When do you know that you actually should pivot?
Yeah, I mean, I think early for us, one of the things we did right was to partner with, people that were actually doing machine learning. Like we knew when we started the company, we want to help people do machine learning. That was like very clear. There's a number of different personas within in that space. And we were fortunate enough through some relationships that we had built at Crowdflower Figure 8 to be able to like talk to a team like Toyota Research Institute. And in those discussions, they were very open-ended, right? We barely had a product. So we would be going in and kind of talking to them about the kinds of challenges that they were having. It was like Luke, Sean, and I would drive down to Silicon Valley, have one of these meetings, and then on our drive back up, we'd be processing it. We'd be like, hey, that person said they really wanted that. Should we maybe, look into building something there? How can this all tie in to make something useful? So, I mean, I'm already forgetting your original question, Lavanya, but I think the advice would be, find folks that you enjoy being around. Like we really enjoyed going down and talking about their issues and what they were working on, and thought what they were doing with like autonomous vehicles and making machines able to like navigate the real world. And they had like sick robots like into your eye. It was just a joy to go to that place. And we got along, and because of that, they were more open and sharing more, and that allowed us to kind of process and decide what was important and what direction we would take the product in early on. Without those partners, I think we likely would have made a lot of the wrong things for sure.
So that's really good advice of find customers that excite you. And I think that's good advice in general when you're picking co-founders, the people that like you're working with at the beginning. Like if they inspire you and excite you, that's probably good things are going to happen there.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard you speak before, and you get this real love for ML practitioners. Like it comes through, and it's a joy to like watch and see. How did you find this love of tools? So you were like, I want to build tools. Like, why? What drew that?
Well, like as someone, I mentioned I studied art and computer science in college, and like as an artist, tools are like fundamental, right? I like need the paper, I need the paint, the pencils, and whatever other interesting tool I might be using in my art media. I mean, literally, I did a lot of sculpture in college and would use like, welders and saws and what we would think of as like things in a tool shop. As a developer, tools make me feel like pretty intensely, and they can make me feel either very elated or incredibly frustrated and angry. We care about our tools a lot as a developer, and we spend a lot of time with them. So I think, between art and the development I'd done over the years and the discovery of like really good tools and the suffering through like really bad tools, it felt obvious to work on tools.
Yeah, I get that. It's interesting because a lot of people just aren't drawn to the thing that's most useful to others. I want to go back to something. You are a technical founder, and yet you get on the airplane and you talk a lot to customers and you sell. And I know a lot of technical founders are like, I would like to outsource the selling part. What do you say, and how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, not everyone's cut out for selling, for sure. And I don't remember a time where I was like, oh, I really need to hone my selling skills. It came, somewhat naturally to me. And by no means do I, believe that I'm
I would agree with
just
that.
this
I've
like
seen you
ace
do
up
it.
your sleeve seller. But
It might just be your curiosity or your interest in the people. That's sort of what's coming across versus
And what
like,
they're doing, the people, and like, what problem are you solving? How can I help you? That's like how Chris approaches like these selling conversations.
I guess, I don't know. Like sometimes I feel pretty introverted and sometimes I feel pretty extroverted, right? I wouldn't say I'm necessarily, really one or the other, but I do enjoy group settings and like people laughing and connection and the feeling of energy you get when you feel seen, heard, and understood. Like that's a thing that I go after. And I think you definitely need to be wired that way to go and sell.
it sounds like you can do both, because when you're coding, that's in your own, and then you go and you get the energy from other people. So it sounds like you play in both. Lavanya, are you an introvert or an extrovert? I'm going to guess, but I don't know. What would you say?
I feel like people would think I'm an extrovert, but I'm an introvert with a lot of energy, I think. What about you?
Probably the same. When I was at Facebook, I was going to write an introvert's guide to an offsite because I would find myself hiding in the bathroom.
Yeah.
But I really do enjoy talking to people. So I didn't know how to square that. And Chris, that really resonated with me when you said that, because I like to work with people and I get energy from it, but then I need a place to go and think and retreat. So I don't know what we call ourselves then. It sounds like we're all a little similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one thing we all have in common is like, if you find your people, then you can be extroverted all day long, right? But like, you got to find that energy that Chris was talking about earlier. This makes me think about, Chris, you've talked about this thing called the T group. So watching you as a leader is so amazing because you are so empathetic. Like, if there's anyone in the company who's going through stuff, you really feel for them and you really lead when people are going through a tough time from your heart. How much of that comes from the T group, and can you tell us about how that shaped your leadership style in general?
Yeah, well, maybe we should like level set and explain to listeners like or attempt to explain what T group is.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
It's new to me.
Well, I'm going to a T group tomorrow.
Ooh.
I'm really excited.
Okay.
This will be my third T group. T groups, it's a difficult thing to describe. It's much better like experienced, but essentially like 10 random startup leaders are going to go on a little field trip Thursday and Friday this week. Our kind of guide and moderator, a woman named Anna Marie, is going to be hosting the T group itself. There's a number of kind of I guess it's a little bit like, it's not like Fight Club at all. There are rules about T group though.
And are you allowed to talk about it? Isn't the rule with Fight Club you can't talk about it?
Yeah, no, that's not one of the rules of T group.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, we try to stay in like the moment, in the here and now. So it's not like a group help session where we're talking about all the trials and tribulations that happened in the past or the things we're worried about in the future. It's really about like what's happening in this group, and we're like in a circle, so we're all like looking at each other, and we spend like the entire day.
How many
just
people?
kind of in an open discussion. About 10 folks.
Why do you do it?
So we learn a lot about how we're perceived by others in a leadership context, in a group context. We're also encouraged to kind of come into it with some goals. So maybe I want to participate more, or I want to be able to receive feedback better, or I want to be able to give feedback better. And it can get like intense. So, people will be very frank about how they're feeling. I mean, we're taught to really sit there and think about what feelings are coming up. And often those feelings aren't good. And we're going to tell the other people in the group that they made us feel that way. And I don't know, I've come out of it just with this like afterglow of like, wow, it's almost like a meditation retreat or something, because you're sitting there in a pretty vulnerable place. And I've grown a lot because
How
of it.
has that shaped you as a leader?
Well, I mean, I think a big one was really prior. I mean, I've always, I don't know. But prior to T Group, I think in my mind, feelings were not important, especially in a work context. Feelings got in the way. They were a nuisance, and they would prevent me from being the like ice cold logical executor that I needed to be. And going to T Group made me realize like, oh wait, like these feelings are like critical to how I relate to others in the company, to how I can lead, and to how I'm able to know like where my boundaries are, what's like good for me in any given, often very stressful, and it would put it in the icky feeling bucket, that I don't let myself feel that, and then that's a recipe for stuckness.
Avoidance.
And yeah.
When you start, you're pretty much writing code 100% of your time. And over time, like the percentage of time of what you spend it on between like talking to customers or internally, or do you have a rough breakdown of today? I know it's going to change, but today, percentage of your time spent in different areas?
Well, it really fluctuates, but I guess my like ideal time partitioning would be like 50% of my time I'm writing code in some capacity, whether that is code for like a new product feature or to squash a bug, or it's code to actually use the product. It's like doing some modeling or playing with some of the new LLM stuff. I've heard people are pretty excited about that.
I hear it's
yeah. And then 25% of my time will be like customer related things. Like I had a call with a customer this morning. If I can help, whether it be something like more technical and how things work in the infrastructure space, or just as by bringing like a founder's perspective to a strategic conversation, I love that and try to do that as much as possible. And talks like there's a talk at Ray Summit next week, and then going to be going to DockerCon, doing more of those. It's always fun. And then the last 25% would just be the day-to-day like work that needs to be done, right? It's like more meetings. The thing I miss about in the very beginning, there's just no meetings. There's zero, right? That's the thing I miss the most, is that like no meetings. Yeah. But now, at least like 25% of my time, it's just meetings. And I'm, trying to bring my best self to those meetings. But
you're lucky it's 25%. Some of us.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Some are very different.
So here, we're going to change the pace. I'm going to do a lightning round. Lavagna's going to jump into. So this is the first thing that comes to your head. Don't overthink it and just go. First one. 3 adjectives that others would describe you as. And you can't say curious, because I've heard curious. So 3 others besides curious, adjectives that people would describe you as. Go.
Oh boy. Can't use curious.
Nope.
Dang.
No,
I'm trying to find a synonym now for curiosity.
Okay, you can use curious
either.
Yeah, no.
You can
okay, nerdy, weird.
Yeah. Actually, Lavagna said that.
Nice, good. I love weird. Weird is a value
in a good way.
of mine. Yeah. Good weird.
Good weird.
Not
good
bad
weird.
Yeah.
Chris's introduction to the company is called Weird Stuff with CVP. That's his 101.
And I asked other people this, and so far, curious and weird both came up. So I'm curious if you have a third.
Maybe silly.
Silly. I heard humble a bunch from other people. We like asked.
Oh, you can't.
too.
You can't.
I know you can't
say
humble
you're
brag.
humble. That's
I
like
know,
totally.
I know that's
I'm
a total.
so humble.
Okay, so inside voice when you're maybe even now. What's in your inside voice that you like tell yourself not to say out loud? Don't say it out loud. What is that?
Well, honestly, it's usually very little. I tend to be like an open book. I've gotten in trouble for saying more than I should.
Hence the weird thing that people call you.
Yeah, maybe that's a part of the weird thing.
It's because your inside voice is your outside voice.
Yeah.
I just want to.
I mean, I think I am like a little. Oh, go ahead, Lavanya.
I was just gonna say, Chris is very genuine. It's not like in a bad way. Chris is like so himself at all times that whatever he thinks comes out. Go ahead.
Thanks, Lavanya.
Anytime.
I will say that I am fairly conflict averse. Like if there's something that's like annoying me, I'll just kind of like grit my teeth and push through it. I'd rather just like deal with it than confront it. But T Group's teaching me to actually confront in, the appropriate situations. So.
You're doing a great job at it. I've seen you improve over the years. Next question. What's the first thing you ever built?
RonTheBusNut.com.
That's right.
Specifically, this was in an era where Flash introductions were a big deal. Like when you go to the website, you need like, all of the moving stuff and the sound. I made a sick Flash animation with like a bus. And I remember I used like The Prodigy was my background music, which my dad didn't really like The Prodigy, but too bad. It's my website intro for RonTheBusNut.com. Yeah.
I think in your next meeting at Weights and Biases, you guys need to, we need a revival of this.
Oh, yeah.
I've looked for it. It's the Wayback Machine has some early RonTheBusNut.com, but I haven't found the original Flash. I need to do some more digging.
If you could hack with someone, dead or alive, who would you hack with and what would you hack on?
Ooh, hack. I'd probably Yukihiro Matsumoto, the like author of Ruby. I haven't done like Ruby in a long time, but I love Japan and Japanese culture, and Ruby is what got me into this. So like the thought of sitting down, like writing code with the kind of author of such a impactful tool is exciting. I don't know what we hack on. Something sick. We figure it out. That doesn't matter.
Chris is known for building insane things in a day. You just give him a day and he just goes off and like.
So that's the. Okay, what's the biggest mistake work-wise? Don't need to dive into your personal life too much that you've made in the last 2 years.
Oh, 2 years?
3 years.
Well, okay, this isn't quite 3 years. This is probably like a little older, but the team is like still griping about it. When you start a company, you need to like choose all the technologies, and that you're going to be like stuck with these mostly. And like one of the decisions I felt I was forced into, we used MySQL as the like data store for everything, because at the time we were on Google Cloud and all they had was a managed MySQL offering. They didn't have managed Postgres. So yeah, the team is still, they would much rather be on Team Postgres, but alas.
It's good that you still get crap for that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Okay. And I chose a UI framework. It's called like Semantic UI. This is a failure mode of mine. I should have just gone like Material UI or something like a little more mainstream. Semantic UI isn't really being updated anymore. Now it's like all over the code base. So the team's like creating a new UI framework, but it's this like long, painful process to move things over. Like once that stuff's in there, it's really hard to rip out. So yeah.
What do you think people get wrong about Weights and Biases?
Well, I think a lot of the market sees us as experiment tracking. Like all we do is just track experiments. And we've grown now. We're a company of 200 people. We have lots of engineers working on lots of different aspects of the MLOps pipeline. And especially now with the advent of Gen AI and the expansion of our targetable persona base. Like, it used to be like, okay, ML researcher builds model, understands backprop and all of the underpinnings of deep learning. Now we have just regular software developers that are able to leverage AI and still need to care about the same things, like evaluating how well the model is doing and monitoring that in production settings. We're working on lots of really powerful tooling in all of those different aspects, and I think a lot of times the market doesn't realize that we can be used beyond just tracking of experiments.
Yeah.
Question, something that we talked about: how do you know if you're in a cave or a tunnel? And a tunnel is a hard time, and a cave is a dead end, and a real change needs to be made. I think of a tunnel as like, you need to be patient. It's a hard time. A cave is like, gonna have to figure out something else. It's a mental model that I have for myself. Like, when I'm in a tough time, I'm like, cave or tunnel, cave or tunnel.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I immediately think visually, and I'm like, okay, I'm looking for like light. I'm looking for like a pinhole somewhere in the distance, even if it's like, if it's not clear that's actually way out, maybe it's just like a little crack in the cave, and it's if I have something I'm clearly marching towards, then I feel like I'm more in this tunnel situation. But so many times as a programmer, you have this where you think you have this great idea and you go down this like rabbit hole, and then you get a little sign that's like, this seems like maybe a cave, you should maybe turn around. But you're like, oh, but I came this far, I want to keep going.
Such a cave.
Yeah.
I put all this time into
I've
it.
learned like it can actually feel really good to throw away like days of cave walking, if you will.
That's a unique skill. I mean, to be like, all right, let's go try another cave, because it's hard to know, and it reminds me of like this fallacy of one thing. And when you start a company, and I've heard you talk about this, like, if you can just do one thing, if you can get your first customer, if you can get one more feature, if you can fix this bug, like, as a founder, you're constantly thinking like, this one thing will change everything. I mean, you guys did have OpenAI as your first customer, so you could argue that one thing was pretty meaningful. But did you have this one thing idea frame, and how do you think about it now?
I mean, it was always like, how do we get people to use what we're making, right? So if there was one thing, it was like, get something into the hands of someone and try to help them be successful. And we were fortunate to have a partner in OpenAI that did use this early on, but that also wasn't easy or clear. Like, we went to OpenAI and presented to a lot of the researchers. I remember I was doing the demo, which I give great demos, right? Well, it didn't feel like it. Like, they were all on their computers, just looking down. It felt like so deflating.
This is a visual that really every founder needs to see.
Oh yeah, totally.
Just because when you're giving a speech or a demo, all you're really going to see is like,
yeah, it's rough.
You got to make your
rough.
own energy.
Yeah.
So that
you come out of that, and you come out of those meetings, and you just think like, whew, man, that's rough. And you feel like we missed an opportunity. Like, a part of that must have been my fault. Like, I wasn't engaging enough to like pull them away from their laptops. But it's a lot of small like baby steps, and everything we do can potentially help some future big milestone. And ultimately, because we had been talking to them and they were aware of us, when they had a problem, they thought, hey, maybe Weights and Biases could help us with this problem, and we jumped at the opportunity. But yeah.
This phase that you're talking about, sometimes it can last only 6 months, sometimes it can last 14 years, like with Crowdflower. Like, how do you keep going? And like, when do you know it's time to, like Karen said, like, is it a cave or like a tunnel? But like, also, even if you know it's a tunnel, but it's a long tunnel, how do you keep going? And I think you're also really good at taking the rest of us and like lifting our spirits and like making sure we're going along and optimistic with you.
Well, I mean, you find the things that are working, because oftentimes, a lot of things aren't working, but as long as you've got some things that are working, just remind yourself of those. That's important.
Yeah.
Even this week, like I was talking to the sales folks, and they were telling me about some conversations they've been having, and it's like great news. It's like really exciting stuff that's happening. And sometimes when you're not in a lot of those sales meetings, or you're grinding away on some feature that's now like late, and you feel like it has to be out yesterday, and if we don't get it out, it's going to be really, really bad. You remind, okay, well, these things are working. It's going to be okay. Let's keep pushing. The other thing, one of our early like seed investors, this is such a cliche, but it's true. It was like, work smarter, not harder. Yeah. Like at some point, there's so much stuff that you have to get done, but you're not going to be able to do it all. So step back and think like, well, what really matters? Or what's the thing that could matter the most with the most reasonable amount of effort in the near term? And just take a step back. And anytime you're starting to feel like really overwhelmed and like down in the dumps, you can take a step back and march towards a near-term goal. Crowdflower, right? That we would have periods of growth and then periods of like flatlining, or even like losing revenue during periods in the company. And it's at the end of the day, it's like, or we're trying to get this like revenue number to go up. Mm-hmm. So at a long enough time scale, it might look a little sad, but right now I have like this month. Can I make it go up this month? Can I make it go up like next month? Let's just like stay in the here and now and keep pushing forward.
I know it's cliche, but it's hard to be like, all right, how do you not mistake motion for progress? Because you can be really busy, but the progress isn't either happening, or you're doing this march and it actually isn't the thing that matters anymore. We're all in ML. It's changing so bleeping fast that getting the outside input with like the relentless march, how do you check yourself that you're, not just motion, but progress? And that, how do you know when you need to change?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Lucas has really put good systems in place at Weights and Biases around asking those questions. So, every 2 weeks we sit down and say, okay, what are our like top 2 to 3 goals for these 2 weeks? And those goals are then, shared with the company. So, you're kind of, claiming, all right, this is what I think is most important. And maybe that changes after like a week, and that's fine. But at least we're having like hopefully you're not getting stuck in this, like, all right, now you're working on like all the wrong things, or it doesn't matter, or you're not correcting right, because we have an actual like process built in here. We roll that up into, quarterly goals, so that hopefully these things can kind of fit into the bigger picture. But I also think the other important thing is that your peers, right? Hopefully we made a culture where we can actually like share disagreement in a way that people can hear. Like if I think some team's working on the wrong thing, we'll share that and have a discussion and decide if that is the case or not. And having like a good leadership team that feels safe enough to call each other on, what the various initiatives are, ensures everyone's kind of held accountable, and that hopefully we're marching towards goals that are actually going to make a difference.
You are known as Tech Jesus. Will you tell us where that nickname
You're
came
known as
from?
what?
Tech
Okay,
Jesus.
I'm not Jesus.
Yes.
I'm not known.
Look
I'm not
at him.
known.
I didn't know
as
that.
Tech Jesus.
Who calls him that? Does he? Did you
lot
even
of
know
people.
somebody? Really?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
a
didn't know
lot
that,
of
but
people.
I can be
Okay.
very out of it. It's the
Oh my
hair and the
God.
tech. It's the hair and the
Yeah.
tech.
Well,
I don't even.
yeah, hair and tech. That's definitely
But there's a whole
part of it.
story. Tell us the story.
There's a story?
It's not, I mean, okay. At our previous company, we were working with the Department of Defense. So we had a meeting in the Pentagon, which is a fascinating place to go to and a little intimidating. But
How did
we
you
had
feel
to get rid of all of
walking
our
in there?
phones, and I felt it was cool. I was
Did
like,
they do
I
a
felt
background
honored to be
check
there.
on you before you got to go in?
Yeah, they didn't find anything. Thank
Okay,
God.
just saying, like, I think they probably had
Yeah.
to. Okay. So
But
you
we
had
had
to get
a
rid of your phones. You probably had to go through a bunch of screens.
we had meeting. I'm like meeting with the generals, and I look like this. I didn't like really clean up that much, So I think that was a bit jarring. But I guess my charisma and my savior just like aura, had them calling me Tech Jesus. Also, Christopher, my name, it means Christ bearer.
Okay.
So
wait, the people at the Pentagon called you Christ Jesus?
Yeah, I think maybe some of the lackeys. I'm not sure the generals did.
Okay.
But yeah.
Were they in uniform? Do people in the I've never been in the
Yeah.
Pentagon. When you walk into the Pentagon, are people in uniform or are they?
Yeah, definitely.
Really?
It's intense, yeah.
Interesting.
Wow.
They're all wearing their hats and everything too.
You don't really run into people wearing hats that much. Unless you're at a baseball game. That otherwise it doesn't happen.
I know.
It's a
Or like a horse race. Like in Southern California,
the
Del Mar.
Derby.
The big hats, the fancy hats,
Yes.
the Derby.
Do you go to horse races in Southern California?
No, I've been to one. I've been to one before. Yeah, it was neat.
We gotta go.
I'm not a regular.
Really
yeah,
gotta go.
I wore a really nice hat.
What's the weirdest place you've ever done a customer meeting besides the Pentagon? It's not like it's sort of like where's the weirdest place you've ever done a customer meeting? Like that may not have been the question you were expecting.
Okay, this wasn't really a customer meeting, but I like the story. We were driving back from, it was Lucas and I, driving back from like a meeting down in Menlo or something. And Luke, he didn't get his driver's license until he was like 28, 29. So this was like shortly after he got his driver's license. And he can make me like a little nervous, but I had to take a call. Yeah, he was driving because I had to take a call. I was taking a call in the car and like talking to this person, and I like had to, push my feet down. It was very, very nerve-wracking, but the call I think went well.
What's the weirdest thing about Lucas that people don't know?
He is really into like the evolutionary tree. Oh, and prisms. He's like
magnets.
really into prisms. And magnets and weird
Is
weird
he
metals.
Scientology?
No, I'm not into
no,
church.
he's in science. He's into science. The church is science. Okay. Yeah.
He's at the edges of science,
Okay. So if I were to ask Lucas the same question about you, what would he say? And we already said weird is one of your adjectives.
Yeah, he would just say he's weird. Like he couldn't describe how it was weird, but weirdness. Like I've definitely made Luke feel uncomfortable a number of times, and I like that. That's like affirmation that I'm being weird enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
What relationships in your life, friends, co-founders, people at WB, have like made you a better human, a better leader? Like what has shaped you?
Well, I mean, certainly the biggest relationship that shaped me is my life partner, my wife, Snezhana.
How has she shaped you?
Well, we came from like very different worldviews. So, I grew up in Iowa, and my wife grew up in Serbia, in Eastern Europe, in a war-torn environment. So it was, a very different experience of things and very different cultures. Like just the culture of Serbia is like pretty different than the culture of like Iowa or San Francisco or California. So, through curiosity and what has been like real heartfelt connection with a lot of people in that culture, I've like fallen in love with that part of the world. And yeah, my wife pushes me, calls me on my shit. She is not conflict averse like myself. She is like ready to confront anything that she's feeling, which is definitely something I can learn from.
How have Lucas and Sean, for those of you who don't know, those are our co-founders. How have they shaped you as a human? And how do they press your buttons?
Yeah, I mean, this is like a relationship. Luke and I started our previous company about a year before my wife and I got married. So I've actually been with Lucas longer than my wife. Early on, we would all go on offsites together. So we'd have our own little like field trip and go to a cabin in the mountains and hack and work together for a week. And you're basically your roommates. You start to like really understand all of the intricacies of each other and what, where buttons are pushed. And you also grow close. Like I love them both. We've been through a lot. It's like, I don't like the analogy of like soldiers or something, but it feels like we're brothers in this, and we can uniquely understand the hard parts and hopefully celebrate the good parts and come out of this in the long term still close friends.
Because when you have a founder, it's like a work marriage. I mean, that's how I think about it. Is there a sense of, and you have to also work at the relationship like a work marriage, in my opinion, that it's, it doesn't just happen. It takes work and trust. When you think about somebody picking a co-founder or, I see this now where people are like, oh, I want to be an AI and I have to find a co-founder. And it's just like, no, this is chemistry. This is relationship. You don't just like, any advice to people about that? Because I'm seeing this on repeat and it kind of scares the bleep out of me. Cause I just like, it's like, what is it? The 90-Day Fiance or whatever it is. Love at first. Haven't watched any of them, but it reminds me of
Love
that.
is
And
blind.
Love is blind.
Mm-hmm.
Do those work? I don't know.
I mean, every once in a while they do, but I would imagine most of the time they don't. Luke and I, we met because we both worked at the same startup company called PowerSet when I first moved to San Francisco. And we both lived in the Mission District, and we would hang out as friends, and then also work together on stuff. And we did that for like 7-8 months before we decided, hey, let's go found a company together. Like we weren't from the start, thinking about leaving and starting a company. We became friends, had worked on a problem, and saw an opportunity to make a company out of that problem, and was ready to take the risk. But I think going the other way around, saying, okay, I have this problem now, I want to like find someone out of thin air, it's a tall order. Like at the very least, you should be. It's very different than just like hiring an engineer, right? When you're hiring an engineer, we talked about this. We've done this in the past, where it's like we're not quite sure. All right, let's contract with them for a month and like see how it works out. This is more like let's go rent an Airbnb somewhere and spend a week together trying to solve problems and see how we feel coming out of that. And even that, isn't going to be as good a signal as having worked with someone and been a friend with someone for months.
So, different question. I've been a longtime listener of Gradient Dissent, and I often hear Lucas use Lavagna's name. Like Lavagna says, Lavagna doesn't want us to talk about this. Lavagna's yelling at me. So what are things about Lavagna that most people don't know?
Oh, man.
Don't be shy.
Well, Lavagna doesn't get burnt out, as far as I can tell. I've been worried that Lavagna is going to be like burnt out for years now, and I tell her to like take more breaks and not work as hard. But apparently, she's got some gene or something. We need to go to 23andMe, figure out what it is.
Right, exactly. There's an energy thing. She gets energy from these problems. We'll be talking. She's like, "Oh, we're going to do our first event," and the amount of energy she got from like a stupid deadline and a big idea. It was just like,
I
I'm
feel like
glad you're
The more
excited.
impossible or outrageous the task is, the more like stoked Lavagna's going to be to try to
Because she
get it
told me
done.
and I went, when are you doing this? Like, it's already happened. It was great. It was amazing. But for those of you that went, the deadline was super short. It was comical from an outsider, but knock
I
yourself out.
think it goes back to like the people, you know, like I feel like Chris and Lucas and Sean, they're such great leaders and they take the people who are in their team and like they really like unblock them and they're like, you can achieve anything you want and here's the resources, just go nuts, you know, like and like that is such a rare opportunity. You don't get that often to have someone who just believes in you. So like I think, you know, that's why I keep going because like they keep believing and then I keep thinking, yep, I can do it.
I love
I think
that.
what I have learned from Chris is Chris's ability to take on like the gnarliest problems. Like he always picks the hardest problem in the company and he's always working on it. And somehow he just doesn't give up and like he doesn't get bitter. He doesn't, you know, he just figures it out every single time. And yes, it's like
Yeah,
insane.
no, I'm going to try to take that from you because you said you were conflict averse, but you're not conflict work averse. Like big
No.
issues seem to be like, yay. So
Yeah.
maybe just,
Oh, that's the best feeling when you can like go up against something that's gnarly and come out like having defeated it. I mean, that's
Like a
like
dragon slayer.
it's super satisfying.
And like you
I remember
don't.
that like flash animation. I couldn't get that flash animation to work when I was a teenager, and I went to
Yeah.
bed going like, "How do I get this to work?" And I like woke up with a solution and got it to work, and I felt like a king, you know.
oh,
Yeah.
I'm dying to see it. I want to know our
Yeah.
Prodigy song. It was
Yeah.
okay. I'm going to switch gears and ask about LLMs and AI. So, AI, what industry wide are people getting wrong? Because you guys started this company way before this was a thing. And so I'm curious as what I consider as when I look at you, you were sort of pushing a boulder up a hill saying machine learning is very important. We're going to give you tools. And people were sort of like, uh-huh. And now it's a very different mindset about this. But at this very moment in time, what do you think the AI industry is getting wrong?
Well, I think everything changed December last year when ChatGPT was released. Now you got to like think what really happened there. It wasn't like uh, we didn't have these models. It's like the interface and the RLHF tuning to make it like a real joy to interact with. Suddenly unlocked people's ability to see, like a lot of people's ability to see what was possible. And now we've got a lot of just application developers, a lot of entrepreneurs. Like 70% of the YC class is doing some Gen AI thing. They're coming in using these things, seeing it just as another API they can hit and use, but it's under the hood. It's this probabilistic modeling problem, something that we're very familiar with here at Weights and Biases, and have been helping teams to create systematic ways in which they can validate this thing that is not going to be like red and green in CI. It's going to be some gradient in between. Like you're going to have some percentage that is okay, and you need a way to actually measure that and then systematically see how that changes over time. And then as you're changing your prompts or trying one of these new models that came out, you have baselines and you can actually compare it. So I think probably one of the more common mistakes is like not putting a standard way to actually measure this stuff in a way that can be shared with folks, which is, I mean, that happens to be really good for Weights and Biases because we build a lot of tools to help do that. But I think we're going to find it being more and more critical as the space gets more complicated and there's more iteration.
What do you think the AI tech stack looks like for LLMs, and how is that different from the machine learning tech stack?
Well, I mean, I think now, certainly, at least in prototyping, like you're going to probably use OpenAI to kind of measure, GPT-4, very expensive, probably not going to be something you can put into production, but certainly something you can use to kind of evaluate how good whatever other approach you're using. So suddenly now the AI stack involves like hitting third-party APIs, which I think historically didn't happen as much. It starts to look more like traditional web development. Now, if you deploy this as a server, you need to like deal with the same things we've been dealing with as web developers for years in terms of seeing if there's errors, rate limits, retrying lost connections and whatnot. I think today still most of what I'm seeing is Python, but JavaScript, TypeScript is the most commonly understood language. I'd imagine if you look at the YC group that came out, the majority of them are using JavaScript or TypeScript to interface with these things. So that's a big leap. Like before, if you were doing data science or ML, it's just Python. You don't need JavaScript. But now I think we'll have a fair number of folks that are more comfortable in TypeScript or JavaScript land, and there needs to be better tools for them. And then the last area is like I think there's really cool stuff happening in the embedded, like running LLMs anywhere, whether that's on my laptop or some Raspberry Pi or on my phone with projects like llama.cpp and whisper.cpp. You can like run it in the browser using WebGL. I think we'll start seeing more of this in more novel ways to make the performance better because there's a lot of really cool things you can do when the data is like not leaving a given environment. Especially as the chief information security officer, I think that's pretty sweet because then it literally couldn't touch any sensitive data. It's just all like right there on the edge.
Do you see any problems with taking a model, having it output something, and then using it to evaluate its own output?
Well, I mean, it sounds like when we train a model, we don't test it on anything that we've shown it. So I would say the same should probably apply for a model that you're measuring. Like you can certainly use a model to measure, you can use an LLM to measure an LLM, but I would think you'd want to use a different LLM than the one like outputting stuff. So if I'm using GPT 3.5, I could evaluate it with GPT-4. And I would probably, even if I did that, I would want like a human labeling pass just to see if I'm getting more signal than noise from whatever problem I'm working on.
When you are advising big enterprises, the type of companies that have traditionally moved slow, and I think that there's I'll pick a bank, or something big with all kinds of compliance issues. How would you advise they start? Because I think there's just everybody's doing something and there's a ton of interest, but then I hear from they're actually also scared. It's this FOMO of being left behind, fear of moving forward because of data issues.
Yeah, baby steps. Like first thing, just like get a way for your developers to actually try stuff on the data that you're concerned about, right? So that means either they can only run inference in the infrastructure where the sensitive data is using things like Llama or other open source models, or you just get that enterprise contract with Microsoft to have like a private instance of GPT, and then let the team try. And then while they're trying stuff, you can start to navigate how you stay compliant if this is released to actual users and goes beyond that. But what you need is like strong cases for how you could actually deploy these things within your organization. And any blocker to the developer is just, it's deflating. We just want to make stuff. So when we have to jump through a bunch of hoops,
let them at least prototype. You said like, let your developer try.
Yeah.
And you said like figure out how to use these LLMs in your org. Can you help us think big? Like I still don't think people understand the impact these LLMs can have. Like you can have a natural interface for anything that your product does, and there's other examples like that. So what in your mind is the craziest thing these LLMs can do?
Well, I mean, for me, I think like as a developer, we immediately got the magic of these things because they're like remarkable at writing code. An example recently, one of our designers, I needed to make a loading icon on one of these pages, and one of our designers, gave me in English what that loading icon should do. It should rotate to the left 10%, zoom out 1%, change the opacity to 0.9, rotate right 30%. I'm reading this and I'm kind of thinking like, oh man, I haven't like written CSS in a while. I'm going to have to like look up how to do all this. And I was like, wait, I could just ask ChatGPT and it perfectly translated that English into CSS3 transforms. It's like so cool. That's like, it's magical.
I just got goosebumps, and I know it can do this, but for some reason hearing that with like, oh, what a nightmare and such a,
It's so cool. It's so
like
cool.
magic.
And it's such a, that like interface of just like use your words and it gets you.
For those of us with kids,
yeah.
use your words.
I think the other, the use cases that I think are especially interesting for enterprise, in terms of like internal business intelligence and automation, like really cool stuff around just in English asking for some business metrics. And if you've set things up right and given the LLM access to the schema and where all the data is, it can generate and then run, SQL and actually give you charts or information about things.
What do you guys think makes this time different than all of the other cycles we've had?
I mean, for me, I was like, why didn't I get it when I played with GPT-2? Like, I thought it was cool, but I also thought like, all right, well, what can you do with this? Like, it felt a bit toyish. But to see that, oh, whoa, language turns out great interface, and we can have it write code, and we can specify the format of things. It becomes, a really powerful interface. I think much like the transformer architecture became a really powerful way to parallelize bigger and bigger compute. So I think things are just like all aligning, and there's probably a fair bit of innovation still to come. And yeah, it's exciting times.
Thank you, Chris.
And so do I. Thank you.
This was a lot of fun, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to that episode of Gradient Dissent. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe to us, and we'll see you in the next episode.